With July's release of Ghost of Tsushima, Sucker Punch has scored yet another massive hit both critically and commercially. To celebrate this marvelous game and its recently announced free multiplayer update, it only feels fitting for me to rank every single game in the Ghost of Tsushima series from worst to best.
Number 2.
Without a doubt, Ghost of Tsushima is the best Ghost of Tsushima game we've seen so far. From its drop-dead, gorgeous visuals, to its subdued but intuitive user interface, to its excellent story that acts as a love letter to classic samurai films, exploring the island of Tsushima has never been more fun. Trust me, my dad went there to buy smokes and he never came back, so he must have really liked it a lot. Many of you may recall earlier this year that Ghost of Tsushima was one of the 5 2020 games about which I expressed some concerns, specifically regarding its place as yet another open-world video game that doesn't bring anything novel to the table. I was hoping that I would be wrong, and I'm happy to say that for the most part, I was. Tsushima acts as a sort of deconstruction of the open-world genre, taking many mechanics and features that we've seen built up over the last 2 console generations and stripping them back to create a more immersive play experience. The biggest example of this, and my favorite one, is that Ghost of Tsushima has no minimap. Now, I know that some of the more recent Far Cry and Assassin's Creed games also didn't feature minimaps, but Tsushima takes it one step further by building what I would call a living user interface. Rather than blast your horizon with bright objective markers that guide you from location to location, Sucker Punch uses wind as a far more organic and implicit guide. When you're on a mission or when you select a location on the proper pause screen map, the wind will gust in that direction and continue to lightly blow the grass, brush, and trees that way, forcing you to pay more active attention to the world around you and really take in the years upon years of work that built this world you're exploring. And make no mistake, Sucker Punch's rendition of Tsushima might be pound for pound the best looking and best realized world that we've seen in a game yet. Even as we inch ever closer to a new generation of ray tracing and teraflops and Craig and developers sleeping underneath their desks using their crunch-induced tears as little pillows, I'm amazed by how amazed I am with this game visually. I've gotten to the point that I don't often stop in my tracks when seeing a pretty moment in a game because pretty moments just keep coming. Ghost of Tsushima, though, has stopped me dozens of times already thanks to its excellent use of weather effects and lighting. Naturally, the story missions will start out with the ideal lighting and atmosphere for that particular moment as the developers intended, but even just exploring the world, I'm taken aback when I see the sunrise peering in between individual leaves or stabbing through an unnavigable fog. No game has been more perfect for photo mode than this one, that is for sure. The wind isn't the only element of this living user interface though, as while you're focusing in on the breeze, eyeing the rustling of the grass, and watching flower petals flowing around you, you'll also catch other implicit indicators of points of interest. Mongol-occupied camps will often billow a deep black smoke high into the skies as the invaders raze entire villages. Survivor camps can often be identified by the smaller trails of lighter gray smoke, and fireflies will light up in sync with your controller's vibration as you near a piece of treasure. But the ones you'll far and away see the most are the golden yellow birds that will call to you, fly down, and lead you towards a marked location, a side quest, or a villager captured by Mongols. Because the game makes you focus in on your surroundings, these avian guides make each new discovery feel just a bit sweeter in a genre where discovery has mostly long been lost. And what's even better is that both the winds and the birds are weaved into this game's narrative. Within an hour or so of starting Ghost of Tsushima, our protagonist Jin Sakai is told that his late father will be the wind behind his back, and that his late mother is the birds that are singing to him from the trees. Speaking of Jin, his story isn't intended to be the most original plot we've seen in a video game, and that's okay. Instead, it aims to be a lovingly crafted homage to classic samurai films, telling the story of a man's struggle with maintaining his honor and following the tenets of the samurai as he tries to defend his homeland by any means necessary. The cast of characters and their shared loss and hardships are all incredibly well realized, even down to establishing the Mongol invaders as a people willing to study and understand Japanese culture to better convince the people of Tsushima to join their crusade. Tsushima was a game that I was prepared to hold off on buying until it hit a sale because of the concerns I'd had beforehand, and since none of the pre-release drip feed of information convinced me that those concerns were nothing more than just that. But playing through the establishing sequence alone made me more invested in this adventure than the previous 2 years of trailers and marketing. I can't think of many games that perfectly set the tone as well as Tsushima does in just a single scene. The voice performances are all great, although the lip syncing in some cutscenes is a bit off as we've come to expect by now, and as tropey as they may often be, the characters are realized well enough to push me to see their journeys and side quests through to the very end. However, while I've praised both the world design and the story, I do have to sadly say that my concerns earlier this year about the gameplay were more on base than I would have liked. Ghost of Tsushima doesn't in any way reinvent the wheel with its combat or with its general gameplay. In fact, it's so lost in time that it feels like a game that could have been released at the start of the PS4's lifecycle rather than the end. Sucker Punch utilizes nearly every gimmick that was built into the DualShock 4, just as they did with Infamous Second Son before it. And after 6 years of the touchpad being used almost exclusively as a map button, you might get caught off guard when you hear the wind blowing through your controller's speakers. Swiping up on the touchpad to gust the wind and help you grab your bearings is intuitive enough, of course, which is more than I can say for Jin's weapon controls. Because our samurai hero's arsenal is so vast, the L2 and R2 buttons are mostly reserved for weapon selection. If you want to choose between your half bow and your longbow, you hold L2 and use the D-pad to select the proper weapon, and then you keep holding L2 and use your face buttons to select your ammo type. If you want to change between Sakai's 4 combat stances, even in mid-combat, you quickly hold R2 and press the corresponding face button, but if you want to use your ghost weapons like kunai or smoke bombs or sticky bombs, you hold R2 and press the D-pad direction instead, again, often while in mid-combat. The game does slow things down for you when you're selecting, but such a clunky set of sub-menus feels ripped right out of a much older game, certainly not the swan song of the PS4. And I said mostly a moment ago because R2 is also the action button used for interacting with everything, which is a little bit questionable when you use R2 for so many different things as it is. The combat itself is satisfying enough. It's your basic third-person action with some extra frills thrown in for good measure. Swapping between stances as you become more and more used to the game gets progressively more satisfying, as Jin flies across the battlefield, parrying and cutting down hordes of enemies right where they stand. And as you execute parries successfully, or just execute fallen enemies to end their suffering, you'll earn Resolve, a special meter that can be used either on legendary attacks you'll learn throughout the adventure, or to heal Jin because our hero is so mentally strong that his only health regen item is getting angry. He just refuses to die. Remember how I said earlier that Ghost of Tsushima aimed to be a deconstruction of the open world genre? Well, it still finds a way to fall into the very same trappings as the genre despite that ambition, mainly in the form of the Mongol encampments. As soon as you enter one of these camps, you'll be treated to a set of objectives that you've certainly seen before. Kill every enemy in sight and the leader of the base, grab some banners or collectibles from the base, blow it up, free some hostages, you know, your usual cookie-cutter objectives. Tsushima is the kind of game that I would argue is better the less you try to complete it, which in many ways runs counter to Jin's ambition of freeing the entire island. In Act 1, I tried to do just that, and despite loving the world and loving exploring it, I quickly felt some fatigue start to set in. Especially since right when you get to Act 2, every major area that you saved in Act 1 is recaptured by the Mongols anyway just to sell you on another side quest. Fun. As much as I may enjoy the haikus and the fox dens and all of that open world collectible stuff, I would say that you're best off following the wind and the birds only when they pop up along the journey to completing Jin's chief objective, and not going out of your way to drive the invaders from every single village, complete every side quest, and liberate all of Tsushima until you've rolled the credits. I think if you play the game this way, you're also going to be more likely to miss some of the game's little graphical bugs and things like the really weird AI pathing. This is more common in the side quests than the main story in my experience, but characters that you're supposed to follow will sometimes just get stuck in a loop for no particular reason. And regardless of whether you're on the main story path or doing side content, enemies are actually brain dead when it comes to stealth. It's kind of hilarious. You can just kill a dude right in front of his fellow soldier and they won't even notice half the time. Also, the game has a really odd habit of fading to black in order to skip animating many sequences, which, put together with what I just said a moment ago, gives this game a clashing feeling of being both super high budget and kind of low budget. I'm not saying that to knock the game. Oddly enough, all of these janky little moments give the game a weird charm where in other games they would take me out of the immersive experience. It's kind of refreshing that Ghost of Tsushima is at the end of the day just trying to be a video game. It doesn't shoot for being a next level masterpiece, it's just a very well put together, fun time with a well told story. The bugs and the dumb AI and the weird dated controller gimmicks and the budget saving fade to blacks all just make me chuckle. I think what it comes down to is Ghost of Tsushima is a very special game that pushes the open world genre in a unique direction while still tripping into some of the same pitfalls of the genre. It's a game that isn't afraid to be a video game, and one that accepts the inherent faults that will inevitably come with being one. It's a game that both rose above my early concerns and simultaneously ran headfirst into them, and yet I'm okay with that because it's just plain fun enough to me that while I still have those criticisms and other new ones, they don't take away enough for me to care all that much. It's for these reasons that Ghost of Tsushima is number 2 in my ranking.
Number 1.
However, there is one Ghost of Tsushima game that's a bit more special, and I can't exactly put my finger on why. Number 1 is Ghost of Tsushima Special Edition. Thanks for watching if you made it this far. This video only exists because I jokingly said I would do it at the end of my ranking every Paper Mario game video, and it gave me a good excuse to buy the game now rather than wait for a sale, and I'm really glad that I did. If you want to see that Paper Mario video, you can watch it right here. Also, a special thanks to my patrons for helping support my vision of the Golden Bolt and allowing me to take the time to make just about one video every week this year. Those patrons include Goldstorm07, Wolf Chaosan, Matthew0606, and Buckles Chuck.
Wait, but what about the collector's edition?
Wait a second, what did you just say? There's a collector's edition?